Can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I can hear you too. Hey everyone, okay, we're live. Welcome to Professional Novice with Ali Rizvi. My name is Ali Rizvi, and it's good to. Well, I mean, this is a really exciting episode. This is kind of cool. I've been talking to Luke Griffiths from False Heads for a while now, and then he's actually on the show. This is actually, I think this is one of the most exciting rock bands out there. Now, I'll tell you why I think Luke. Why I think that this is just in terms of rock, as I grew up with rock music. Why I think this is really special. But just a quick intro first. Luke Griffiths fronts one of the most exciting new rock bands in the UK. Former Ramones manager Danny Fields has called your band the future of rock and roll and one of the best live bands in the world. And then Iggy Pop, the rock icon Iggy Pop, like he's basically declared himself a fan. You've opened for the Libertines, you've opened for Queens of the Stone Age, but I know that we've talked before, and I know that none of it really came easy. So we're going to get into a little bit of your story, which I think is really interesting, a little bit unique when it comes to people in rock music. So, first of all, how are you doing? How's everything going? You just came back from tour.
I'm very well. No, thanks for having me, man. That was a very nice intro. Yeah, we just come back from tour. Been back a couple of weeks now. So, yeah, it was our first tour because, as I said, we put our first album out on the Friday of March 2020, and then on the Monday, lockdown. So all of our tour got cancelled. Our trip to South by Southwest got cancelled. So it felt like a bit of a release of energy, and the crowds they're just fucking great. So it was amazing, but I think I'm still recovering slightly, to be fair. But it was good.
Yeah, you said so. This thing. So your first record was It's All There But You're Dreaming. Yeah, for everybody, it's on all the streaming services. It's an amazing record, and that came out in March 2020. That's right when the pandemic hit, and that shut down a lot of things for you. So, like, how frustrating was that? I mean, this is like sort of your big break. You were supposed to go on tour in the US.
Yeah, so we had our UK tour lined up, obviously, and then we were meant to be going to the States to play New York. I think we was doing a show in Boston, and then we was going to South by Southwest, which was like the big kind of media music festival in Austin, which was a bit of a life, bucket list type thing. And then that all went, and then we had our TV debut, which was on like Rockoplasty in Germany, which was is like their kind of Jules Holland, not really Saturday Night Live, but like they have new bands playing there. And then that got cancelled too. So, I was just like, fuck's sake. It was so, it was pretty brutal. I mean, like, it was to the point where everything shut in the UK. It was like pretty hardcore lockdown, the first one. Mm-hmm. So even like the vinyl and the physical product, like not all of it could get shipped to the record stores. So like our manager called me and was like, can you take like 500 vinyl like to put in the flat? I was like, yeah, brilliant. So like just cleared out the spare room, said to my girlfriend, like, this is like the stock room now. So yeah, it was like a dead end really.
But it did well, like I guess obviously, I mean, you guys it would have been much bigger, but it didn't really. I guess it held you back a little bit, but not that much. I mean, you've got Iggy Pop, so Iggy Pop saying that he's a fan. Did you get a chance to talk to him at all, to correspond with him?
Yeah, we email sometimes. That came through Danny, really, who obviously he managed the Ramones, he managed Iggy Pop, and then he just became our mentor. He saw us in Camden. To like 4 people. He was one of the people in the crowd. A mutual friend of ours said, like, you love this band. He was interviewing him on a radio show. He's like, come and see this band. You'll love him. He did. And then he sent it to Iggy, and then Iggy Pop liked it, and then he gave me Iggy's email, and so every now and then we email, and he's fucking, he's one of the last bastions of like rock god kind of royalty. But he's a really nice guy. Like, he's always got time, because he's kind of like, we've got radio pluggers and stuff, but he's sort of his own thing. So like, I'll just send him it to him personally. Like, here's a new single, here's a new album, and he'll just play it if he likes it. So that's kind of where that started, really.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm going to ask you some. So there's some things that I relate to you on with, especially when it comes to the state of rock music, which I know that you've talked about a lot. Yeah. Right. And I think you probably have a lot to say. So like, I'm basically a rock fan. I've been in rock bands. I've played and sang in them. And so, but I understand when people say, rock and roll is dying or rock is dead, because when I listen to rock music today, a lot of it's like what it used to be about, what it should be about is, you know, just rebellion. There was a danger to it. There was an anger. There was like this fuck you factor, right?
Yeah.
And then now, like I just don't see that anymore. I mean, even mainstream pop music, like early Lady Gaga, has more of a fuck you factor and more rebellion to it than a lot of rock bands nowadays. So the reason I really liked hearing your stuff and all the stuff that you've sent me to is that there's this. It just naturally comes out, like your personality and everything you've been through just comes out straight through the music. But you grew up in a working class background, which I think we'll get into. And along with your bandmates, and you've talked about how classist the music industry has become. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, you said that you felt like there was, I guess I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sort of sterilization in rock music that's happening right now is because of the fact that there's no class diversity in the music industry. So when you came up against it, you were going up, what did you find in the music industry? How'd you come up against that?
So I think real quick as well, we all come from similar backgrounds where, you know, my mum and dad were really working class. My dad was from the underclass, so like my granddad robbed banks and stuff, and my dad grew up in a really rough part of Canning Town, and which is a rough part of East London. I was born there, and then my dad started getting good at selling windows, so we moved out, and so I didn't grow up poor. So I felt like I had a naive idea on what class was. All my family were really working class. We'd go back to Canning Town, but I was like, well, that's what happens, you know, like your mum and dad are poor, and then they get a better job, and then they move you out. And I was the first to go to university in my family, and and then Barney and Jake were similar. Work. Jake's parents were Irish immigrants. They grew up in a part of East London called Seven Kings, and Barney's from East Ham, and then they moved out when their parents got a bit more money. And so I think we have similar experiences like that. And they were the first to go to university. But then I went to, because Upminster, where I live, is a weird little place. It's like kind of old school middle classes, and then you've got like my family who probably moved up into the lower middle classes, who came from a working class background and gave their kids the opportunity to do something that they love. But I remember going to uni and being kind of taken back about like kind of understanding the class system a little bit more, because I didn't grow up poor. My mum and dad did, but I felt like, oh, you know, like they've given me this opportunity. But realizing that these kids at uni come out and walk into a job as a banker or as a top accountant, and I went back, and my dad, which I was very, very, you know, happy for, got me a job doing telesales, you know, cold calling people for his solar company that he was working for at the time. He was selling solar at that point. Right. And then I started making a band, and the band got quite serious. Probably about a year straight away after uni, we started getting interest from labels and stuff like that. And I remember thinking like, fuck me, like what is this world of like kids that like their parents work in the music industry, or their parents are so rich that like they can pay their rent to live in London. And I remember kind of then realizing like, oh, I think this is one of the reasons that rock and roll in particular, and some of the aspects in the entertainment industry, pop and rock, we'll get onto hip hop in a minute, because I think there's something a bit different about hip hop. But that was my experience, was like, it was just absolutely full of kids that parents are either so rich they could completely facilitate their lifestyle and they didn't have to get a job. I had to come out of uni and get a job. Jake had to get a job. Barney had to get a job. Or parents who just worked in the music industry. And I honestly think I've got that drive and I've loved it, but I don't know how I could have done it if we never moved into the lower middle classes and my dad didn't, you know, that I couldn't go and get a job or something. Like, if I was still so poor that I had to help out with the rent for my family and stuff like that, which I was lucky that I didn't have to do the way that my mum did. Or, you know, my mum used to come home from school and cook dinner for the family at 14 because mum, you know, that my nan and granddad were out to work, you know, and my dad was just trying to probably not get arrested at the time. But so that was my perspective of it, that there was just absolutely or very little class diversity in rock and roll in particular, and pop music. And I was shocked by the amount of posh fucking accents that it was just surreal to me, really. And I think that's one thing that I speak about, because I think it's a bit of a shame that it's not really being addressed.
Yeah, because that's not the story you hear usually, right? You usually hear, you know, people, well, at least in the US, you hear people of, just landing in Los Angeles, like on a bus with like $10 in their pocket and then waiting tables and, and just making their way up. So it's, that sounds really, I was surprised to hear that, so most of the people in the rock scene, you're saying like they're just kids from people in the record industry, or they're just.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a few coming through now. There's a kind of a hip hop / rock group that I think you'd like, called Bob Villain. He's from, I think he was actually born in the same hospital as me, but I think he lived there for a lot longer. I think he's somewhere in East London that he grew up. And so there's a few kind of underground people that have been doing it for years and years and years. But the vast majority of my experience in rock and roll and pop music, when we started talking to labels and stuff like that, all the people at the labels, most of the people at the management, most people there are all from very, very wealthy families. They've got a job doing something, or they're doing something in rock and roll because their family were involved in the music industry at some point. And I think that's a shame. And I think that's kind of why you see it's a less visceral genre, I think. And I think it's less relatable for a lot of normal working people now. That's kind of one of the things I think that's happened in rock music, where I mean, there's a weird current trend in rock and roll, especially in the UK indie, where it's just like kind of like people kind of talking over like a bass line about like the most mundane middle class nonsense that I just can't really relate to. And like that just seems to be like the current thing in rock and roll. And no one really cares about songs that much either anymore. It's just sort of like weird, artsy, kind of A-level uni student fucking rock music. And I think that's kind of where it is now. That's what I think. That's my experience of it.
Well, it's a good thing you got into it, because I think you guys hopefully will change that. But so you came in. What got you into music? So I know that it started with, like, I read you said it started with Eminem, right? It was like a hip hop.
Yeah, it was hip hop.
You were a kid.
Hip hop was kind of the first thing I really got into. And in the UK, when I was growing up, it was grime was started to become kind of the prevalent form of hip hop in the UK. So it was kind of like Eminem first. Then you had like Dizzy Rascal's first album here, and everyone was sharing like these mixtapes of all these grime artists that would end up being massive, like Skepta. I think Skepta did a track with Drake and stuff now. Like it's, but that, I think that's hip hop and grime still retains a lot of that working class element. I think because it's harder to pull off in hip hop that you're not completely legit, or you've not had some kind of hardship. I think that will change. I think you're seeing it a bit now. I think as the genre is older, rock and roll is an older genre, hip hop's a younger genre. But I think now you'll see more and more people that are from working class backgrounds struggle to get into hip hop. I think that will start to change into more of a industry plant kind of. Even a lot of like mumble rap now, you see, like they're fucking. So many of them are just like middle class as fuck. You know what I mean? It's like, and actually more than middle class. I think they're kind of from wealthy families. I think that's going to start to happen more in hip hop now, which I think is a shame. So Eminem was
depressing, man. That's depressing. It's like, is that like you're just saying that this is what the future is, and what are you what are you optimistic about? What's new and fresh? I mean, will something else come up?
I mean, I hope so, but I mean, it's a bit bleak. But I do think unless something changes pretty drastically, that I think it's going to go that way. Just from my experience seeing kind of those industry meetings and being at like when we were courted by a major label at one point that didn't really work out, Parlophone, and a lot of the people that work there and a lot of the artists coming through, and even like on the hip hop kind of scene, it's just more of a kind of upper middle class kind of born into the industry thing. But I mean, honestly, now I think even go fucking Netflix, like you watch any TV show and you're like, where the fuck did she come from? Where the fuck did he come from? And you look him up and it's just like his dad is like, or his mum is in the industry, or his dad's in the industry. It's like his dad was a producer. And I think that I think the financial crash played a bit of a role in that. I do think I think because what was that, over 10 years ago now, about 10 years, I think that, especially in the UK and especially in the United States, just meant that kind of, and we've had a Tory government for 10 years here, a lot of austerity and cuts and stuff like that. It's just borderline impossible. And then streaming as well. There's not that like income coming in. It's a lot harder to develop your work because you've got to fucking work full time for 4 or 5 years really to get to that point. And I think that's why I think there's a combination of factors as to why that's happening. But things can change. But I think it is quite bleak.
Yeah, man. So there's you do have a wide variety of interests, right? Like, I mean, you've said that I know that you've never shied away from talking about politics. You have an EP called Gutter Press, right?
Yeah.
You guys wrote songs about like the tabloids and just all of the crap in the media nowadays. So you've said that you're a sort of leftist liberal, and I'm curious about how that came about. When you were in the working class family, what was your family's politics like? What were you seeing around you? But yeah, and the way that as a liberal, when you see what's happening with the liberals nowadays, and I know this is my frustration too. I mean, you saw what happened in the last UK election, right? What do you think is going on as somebody who kind of grew up in the working class, right? Which used to be kind of like, especially I find right, and I don't know that much about it, in the northern part of the UK at least. That was a big sort of Labour mainstay. As someone who saw that and now is in sort of more left leaning, what do you think is changing, and what are people doing wrong?
Well, I hate to kind of harp on about it, but I kind of noticed my family, and there's like any family, there's an array of different political beliefs. I say my dad is more left leaning, but there's definitely a disconnect between the working classes a lot, I think, to kind of modern day left kind of leftism, or I suppose now really the prevalent thing is kind of identity politics, really. And I'm not one of these people that's like, I mean, I fucking hate the term woke, from the left using it and the right using it. It's just like a meme now. It doesn't even mean anything, but like the absolute obsession with identity, but a lot of those pockets of kind of now mainstream leftism being very middle class and being heavily focused on culture and art and comedy, and a lot of it is kind of, I just feel like a lot of it is kind of faux compassion and an obsession with identity that just isn't relatable to normal people. And when I say normal people, I mean white, black, straight, gay, trans. I think you have it is changing a bit, because I think social media is infecting people's lives in real time. But you find someone with a job who's like just wants to get on and wants people to kind of listen to them. Yeah, of course, identity and gender and sexuality and all those things that are still things in society that aren't completely equal, and there's issues that surround those kind of things, sexism and racism, obviously. But I do think a lot of normal working people, whether that be gay, straight, black, whatever, like struggle to identify with kind of, well, let's just go after a TV show this week. Let's just like, this is the thing of this little pocket of identity that is the problem. This is the narrative this week, and we're gonna deal with this. And if you're not on this side this particular week about this person we're taking down on Twitter, then like fuck you, and you can step outside of what leftism now. You're not included. You're all right. You can fuck off. You're a conservative.
Excommunicated.
And that's so self-evidently stupid. But I think a lot of these people can't see it because they are in a bubble of kind of a class where like they don't really have to worry about job or something that will directly affect them. Kind of the way that my analogy of a lot of that is like, you have the mansion, right? And the people that are in the penthouse suite still, that have inherited all the wealth, inherited all the opportunity, because class is also opportunity, whether it's wealth as well. They just have to walk about. They're almost always straight white men, a small percentage of straight white men or straight white people in general. Yeah. But they're still in the penthouse. But all they have to do now is walk around and just go, I'm sorry about being white. I'm sorry about being straight. But they still live in the penthouse. And then if a minority comes in and knocks on the door, as long as they follow that particular kind of belief system that is something that's being addressed that week about something in the news or something that we're now saying this is racist, if they agree with that, they can come in. If they don't, they can get to fuck, even if they're poor and they need help. And then if you get a poor white guy knocking on the door, the fucking rich white guy opens the door and says, "Oh, like, haven't you heard? There's enough of us in here already." It's like, but so then the door is closed on them, but the people that still like operating, they still live there. That's the way that I kind of see a lot of that happening, and I don't know what the intention of that is, but it is kind of religious, and I think some of it's misplaced, because I do think at some point, if the mirror was fully turned on those people, a lot more would have to be done to the complete and class inequality and other inequalities that America and a lot of the West still face, would probably mean that they would have to leave the penthouse suite. But if they just walk around and say how bad it is that they're white, then they still get to live in it. And I think that's kind of my take on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, so you're saying that the people living in the penthouse, because they go around, they apologize for being white and apologize for all their privilege, they get to just stay in the penthouse.
They get to, and I think that's what I think a lot of people feel frustrated with. I mean, I know for a fact they do. I mean, I remember when, I was talking to my dad, and my dad's for someone who's completely self-educated, left school at 14 and come from one of the roughest backgrounds that you could possibly imagine. He's pretty clued on, and he's interested in politics, and we talk about stuff. And we talked about white privilege, and he was like, I understand the idea of, even though I was poor, I didn't have to worry about racism in East London. Like, I do understand that concept, but he was saying that he finds it difficult to swallow that when there's some like privately educated upper middle class white guy on the TV talking about some sort of like universal white experience. It's like, well, no, privilege is fluid, and I grew up poor and I grew up in circumstances that you possibly could never relate to. So I think people feel like, well, why are these people talking for me? Do you know what I mean? That's where I think there's a bit of a clash between the working classes and this kind of new wave of leftism that's very identity focused.
Yeah, and I think one thing I relate to you on is I really think that that's where you talk a lot about class, right?
Yeah.
And I think that really is what we should be talking about, because I don't think it's, like the racial aspect, white privilege, brown privilege, whatever it is. I think ultimately it does come down to class. I think a lot of the, the reasons, as you said, when there's sort of rich white men who talk about white privilege, and there are many people in North America, say in like the Rust Belt in the United States, right? If you go to places like Detroit or, in Pennsylvania, but places like that, there are, really high, they're working class white people, who have been laid off. There's an opioid crisis. Like a lot of the kids are just addicted to opioids. The depression rates and the suicide rates and, mental health issues are through the roof, and nobody can really afford treatment for them. And then, they may see somebody like me who looks like me, speaking at an elite university and saying, yeah, white privilege sucks. And then you wonder why they would vote for somebody like Trump. Which is really, it's still stupid to vote for Trump. But I mean, this is what I mean about losing touch. I think the conversation really has to be about class. Like, what you're saying about identity is, this idea of sort of being proud of taking pride in something that you didn't work to earn, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was born in Pakistan. When I was like 6 months old, went to Libya. I knew I wasn't Libyan. I went to Saudi Arabia. I knew I wasn't Saudi. And then, when I went back to Pakistan, I realized, oh, wow, I'm not even Pakistani either. And then, went to the US. I spoke with an American accent, but I wasn't American. I just went to American school. And so I just thought this whole identity stuff, I just didn't have an identity. And I thought it was great. I love the fact that I didn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I struggle to, for me, things like religion and nationalism. I mean, nationalism, it's like what you're proud of a bit of rock that your mum and dad fucked on. I don't understand it, right?
That's all it is.
It's like, and same as religion. And I think what those ideologies do, and I think this is what you're seeing happen in kind of the identity sphere of left-wing politics, is what I hate about religion and nationalism and ideas like that is it makes people followers while convincing them they're leaders. And I think that's what's happening now. And that's the thing, because I think there are completely valid conversations. There's things that I don't know. There's things that my dad don't know, even though he was poor, about what it must be like to have been black or gay in the 70s in London. Like, he's not going to know what that's like. And I think most people would completely understand that. And I think there's valid conversations surrounding that, but it's kind of the hardening of the lines of identity and the idea of like the zero-sum game of like, well, I've got to take a point off you to make a point about something. And I just don't think that's helpful. And it clearly isn't, because there's so many people that are either completely apathetic towards politics. And it's not, I think there's also a kind of a, like, not like a myth that it's just kind of Trump voters that are disillusioned with that. And again, I think voting for Trump's a fucking cunt. That's a fucking moronic thing to do. But like but it's not. I think a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, from a lot of different ethnicities, are disaffected by the mainstream leftism now. And I think it's kind of, that's another myth that's, I think, is a bit of a smokescreen, that it's just like, oh, it's just Trump voters, it's just moronic kind of Trump voters or people that vote Tory or whatever. It's like, I don't think it is. Like, if you have conversations with normal people, a lot of people find it like almost embarrassing. I mean, I can't deal with one more fucking middle class white person with a posh accent just like doing that kind of like faux, my personality is so beautiful, I care about people so much. It's like, I think most people look at that and just think, no, you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't buy a fucking word that you're saying. They go up and collect an awards do, and it's like, do you know, it's like that thing that those celebrity awards dues are the perfect analogy for that. It's like they get up and talk about diversity. It's like, you're so rich, you could set up an acting studio in a fucking poor area, or in a poor black area, or in a poor white area, if you really cared. But you fucking go and take your award and. And I think people see through that, and I think that's kind of what's happening now. That's what I believe.
You had, so again, coming from like a white working class background, there's a lot of you have Tommy Robinson, sort of like the far right dude who gained a lot of traction and got a bit of a following. Especially, there was a lot of sort of anti-Muslim sentiment and anti-immigration stuff. So was there? Like, were you exposed to any of that? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that, like, just from your point of view?
I mean, there's older, especially like older generations of white working class people that definitely are xenophobic and gravitate towards, again, in kind of a weird parallel, basically a bunch of, I mean, Nick Griffin, who was like the BNP leader, was a Cambridge educated, middle class fucking gimp who told all poor white people that, all of their problems are the other poor people. It's the poor immigrants. They're the problem. It's all their fault that you're poor and that, your high street has changed and all that kind of bullshit. And unfortunately, that happens when people are poor. And there was a bit of that. Definitely. I think that's why, there's always elements of truth in things. And I think racism in poor areas, it's a very nuanced subject, because I hate the idea that like, every sort of white working class person, because that's my background, is racist, because it's not true. They're not, again, a monolith of people. But there is that, especially in older generations. It's, they're not all fucking going out like neo-Nazis, but there's xenophobia and stuff like that, definitely, that I heard growing up. And I think there was definitely a period where that was starting to wane and that was starting to die out, from my experience. But in the last 10 years with the internet and the kind of now, culture, whatever you want to call it, between kind of the alt-right and whatever you want to call the middle classation of the left, that I think that started to get a little bit worse in poorer white areas. I do think that, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I found it because, like, where I grew up, it was like the religious theocracy, and like, it's basically the way where I am on all this stuff. I'm not a huge fan of religion, and that includes the religion I grew up in, which is Islam, because it's just entrenched in a lot of these governments in Muslim majority countries. So when I come here and I see this, it's very, what you're saying about elements of truth. Even Tommy Robinson, who I think is, an idiot.
A scumbag, yeah.
But the problem is that him and people like Geert Wilders and in the Netherlands, these guys, like they're accurate when it comes to the diagnosis.
So right? they feel a vacuum too. That's kind of
right.
That for me is why Islam has become such a kind of hot potato topic in the last 10 to 20 years is that the left should have dealt with it. That's what I always think you should be careful to attack the ideology, even if they're people's ideologies, but try not to attack the individual people. I think that's kind of the way that I try to, I know I've just sort of slated some middle class morons, but like in general.
Yeah.
But like, and that's where I think that is how it should be addressed. And I think the left should have taken more of a stance on Islam as a ideology and a religion, while respecting that, again, Muslims aren't monoliths. There's liberal Muslims, there's Muslims that don't care about it anymore, but there are a lot of Muslims that follow Islam to the letter. There's a lot of Muslims that believe in archaic ideas of what, man and female gender roles and homophobia and that kind of stuff. And I think if the left would have got a handle on that and just stopped pretending that it was all Western imperialism that caused that, then I don't think racist scumbags like Tommy Robinson would have filled that vacuum. Tommy Robinson is basically a Christian nationalist. He is the opposite of... they're just a parallel. I mean, for me, that sums it up. Katie Hopkins is always saying horrible racist shit. And I would say she isn't anti-Islam. I think she is anti-Muslims. I mean, she said some awful things about Sadiq Khan, who's our mayor. They were in Birmingham, quite a heavily Muslim area. There was a school that was trying to teach homosexuality at a school. Katie Hopkins is a fundamentalist Christian, and all of these fundamentalist Muslims protested outside the school. She went and met them. Bear in mind, she's been saying for...
They got along.
Yeah, they got along. And it's like, if that doesn't fucking sum it up for me, like, what? Nothing will. But it's like, people, they can't even fucking see that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that's where I think that's what happens. They take elements of truth and they twist it and they manipulate, and that's what happens. And that is, again, I suppose for someone like me and you who are interested in that subject, I've read a lot about the subject. It's just mind-blowingly boring and mundane and predictable how these kind of like tribal leaders are like almost one and the same, and they teach or manipulate people that are under them to hate the other person. It's like, it's just fucking bizarre, and that's again immensely depressing. But
yeah, you can't really there's and this is the problem that's been it's been frustrating for me and a lot of other, there's a huge secular movement from the Muslim world. I mean, there's loads of the ex-Muslim movement is massive right now. There's loads of people who've written books, who are doing podcasts, loads of YouTubers. Like even in the in the Muslim world, there are Arabic and there are Urdu YouTube channels that are having this sort of debate, just like anybody else would in any other religion, right? But but the problem with this is it makes it, you're right, it makes it really hard when you have your Tommy Robinsons and your Gert Wilders is like filling that vacuum, right? Yeah. You're in the situation where you agree with them on the diagnosis, but the treatment that they're giving out is just completely misplaced.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with they're like, okay, we gotta ban this, or we got to curb the immigration, we got to spy on these people, we got to surveil these people, and that's what those guys want. Like, that's what the fundamentalists, they can tell you that the thing that they don't like about in the West, like some of the values of enlightenment, or civil liberties, openness, celebrating diversity, celebrating freedom of speech, all of those things. When you start curbing those in order to fight what you think is terrorism, you've already become a victim of terrorism.
Yeah.
Because that means you're so scared of it, you're so terrorized by this other thing, that you've started compromising on your own fucking values in order to think, and you think you're fighting it, you're not.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the thing is as well, like, Tommy Robinson should be treated with the contempt that he is treated with. And for me, I think that he probably is a white supremacist. He's definitely a Christian. I mean, he said that he's a Christian nationalist, and they are an offshoot of the National Front and all these other racist organizations that have come before them. But you can hate Tommy Robinson like I do and think that he is a scumbag, but also have legitimate criticisms of Islam and fundamentalist, Islamists. And that's kind of I don't get how people can't have that. You know, I don't hate all Christians. Of course I fucking don't. But like Tommy Robinson's version of like England being a Christian country is also a complete affront to my belief in secularism and stuff like that. So it's like I can't understand how that's become a thing where you can't hold those thoughts in your head. And also as well, I mean, you know, because I've been interested in it for so long, I mean, ex-Muslims are probably one of, if not the most oppressed and persecuted group of minorities on the planet, because especially if they're from the Middle East, they leave a religion where, you know, apostasy is literally death, or, you know, whatever kind of watered down version of their punishment for apostasy can be in other Islamic countries. And they are hated by the right wing because they just see them as, you know, brown people that are infiltrating Western society. And then the one group of people that should really be helping them out and propping them up are left wingers, and they kind of don't do it. So it's like a very, very, and also exploited by ex-Muslims seem to be exploited by right wingers like Tommy Robinson, far right wingers like Tommy Robinson, who, you know, basically just prop them out and be like, oh, you know, yeah, he's making my point too, so, you know, I'm all good. And that is just a tragic shame that there are so many people that are trying to, you know, fight for values like the Enlightenment and secularism, and basically just leave something that's, you know, a totalitarian ideology, and the left don't really give a shit about them. And I think that is a tragedy, really.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another place where this stuff crosses. There's an analogy that I made that Tommy Robinson kind of quoted, like he made it his own, but I'd said something a while ago, like several times, and I was quoted on this, where you know what you're saying about criticizing the ideology but not attacking the people. And I said something like, you know, well, smoking may be a filthy habit, but that doesn't mean all smokers are filthy people.
Yeah.
And then he took that, because, you know, he used to follow me. Yeah, when he was on Twitter, he used to follow me. Like, obviously he did, right? Because he just thought, okay.
Yeah.
I used to get a lot of support from people like this. And then he took it, and I was like, okay, shit, I can't use that anymore. Like, I never want to say it. Like, so so we've had to worry about messaging. Like, you know, the way that we were talking about, it's not just a message that you're trying to put out. That's not enough. Like, now it's also about how are you putting out that message? How are you telling that story? Are you speaking to the language of the audience that you really want to reach?
Yeah.
Or are you just in an echo chamber? And it's tough. And so, yeah, speaking of echo chambers, another thing you feel really strongly about is the media and social media, right? And it's so again, Gutter Press, the EP. So tell me about that. Like, why the title Gutter Press? And
well, so Gutter Press was just the last line of our song 20 Nothing, which ended up going on our album. I would have liked to have saved that for the album title, really, but I called the EP Gutter Press. But it was kind of more of how, like, you know, people think of the Gutter Press stereotypically as like the tabloids and stuff like that, but really now we are all constantly a part of it, and we're always constantly contributing to it because of social media, and that is genuinely terrifying to me. I mean, I'm a hypocrite because I have to use it for my band, but you know, I've unfollowed everyone. I don't follow anyone now on Twitter or on my private Instagram. I do, but I deleted Facebook, and because I kind of got to a point where I just realized, like, I'm never changing anyone's mind, and no one's really ever changing my mind anymore. And I sort of do kind of pride myself on trying to read a reasonable source on the left wing's argument and a reasonable source on the right wing argument, but it's very difficult. And the idea of Gutter Press was like, it's becoming, the news cycle is too quick. Everything we're dealing with is too quick, and we're constantly contributing. We are basically our own tabloids now, and I think that's fucking frightening, really. And then you create your own echo chamber, and you create your own tabloid because you're constantly in it, and you're constantly, you know, shouting down a wind tunnel with the illusion that loads of people are listening because you get 100 likes on a tweet. And that's just scary to me.
It is. It's a weird thing to see that sometimes, you know, you're on, and this is why I stopped taking it seriously a very long time ago. Is that, you know, you'll say something online and then everybody will come after you. You've got like hundreds of people just piling on you, and you think, oh my God, like I understand like all those kids who are on this stuff, when they get piled on that way, they become suicidal and they get really, really depressed. But the thing is, when you're like, okay, and you turn off your phone or you turn off your computer, and then you go into the real world, your workplace, and suddenly everybody's normal again. Nobody even knows what you said. It's such a vast disconnect.
And it is,
you can't let that stuff get to you. But you know what? I'm really interested right now in the way that people tell stories, and this is why, you as a musician, like especially because some of the kind of ideas that you have, and writing the music that you do. I know a lot of it is personal stuff, but a lot of it, like with Gutter Press, you do make those statements too. Storytelling through art, I just think is so much more powerful. And And I've talked about this before, like in terms of like just I'm in my 40s, and I grew up when everybody was homophobic, right?
Yeah,
everybody like that slur. They used to use all kinds of slurs towards gay people who just thought that they were terrible. And I grew up that way too. I grew up thinking that way for a while. And there would be all of these, people were arguing about it. There was no Twitter or social media, but there were, people writing articles and people debating on TV about whether gay people should have rights or not. And, everybody had their own opinion, and you're all processing it mentally. And then that movie came out, Philadelphia. I don't know if you know about it.
Oh, yeah, the Tom Hanks film. Yeah, great film.
Yeah, and I saw that, and that completely changed my mind.
Yeah.
Completely, like immediately, overnight. You're talking about how you got off of Facebook and you're like, okay, this isn't going to change anybody's mind. Well, I think, with your music, film, art, comedy, that I think is a lot more powerful. Like George Carlin's comedy.
Yeah.
Actually changed my mind on a lot of things. Like I'd watch it, and it was almost, and I would laugh. And when you put humor into things, it would kind of disarm me.
100%.
Your defenses down, and then, so, do you think? Do you ever feel that? I mean, I guess how powerful it is.
Yeah.
Like the medium that you have. Like, do you ever think about that? Just in terms of...
well, I think I think art did that for me. And I mean, I'm only in my 20s, and there was still a lot of homophobia at school. And for me, actually, weirdly, it was. I mean, Christopher Hitchens did a lot for me. But kind of his like God Is Not Great was one of the first kind of anti-religious books that I read. But in that moment, I kind of realized the construct of nationalism and all that stuff was bullshit true as well. And I just kind of remember thinking, like, why the fuck does anyone actually care if someone's gay? I just because I actually wasn't that homophobic, but it's the culture that you're in, isn't it? Like the worst thing at school was like, oh, you're gay. Do you know what I mean? And that must be terrible for a gay person. I can't even imagine what that was like. And I think, but I remember, being like, oh my God, like we just don't like gay people because we've had like hundreds and thousands of years of conditioning, and it comes out in all these other, like in all these societal aspects because of some arbitrary sense of what it is for a religion. But I think art does that as well. I mean, for me, Eminem was, well, I mean, I know he said quite a lot of homophobic shit, but for me, Eminem though is a good example because people get that the wrong way now. It's like, for me, Eminem was a complete deconstruction of like toxic masculinity. Like the Marshall Mathers LP and the Slim Shady LP. When he's singing about killing his wife on Kim. Yeah. If you walk away from that thinking that like you should go out and kill your wife, you're a fucking moron. I mean, it's like pure pain and anger and like what he thinks he has to be like to be a man. He feels like he has to be violent. He feels like he has to be like this. And people think of Eminem as this like disgusting fucking vile human being, when for me Eminem was like a complete deconstruction of what of masculinity and things like that. And I think art is extremely powerful to do that. I mean, Nirvana did that for me. Kurt Cobain and Nirvana did that for me. That was a big one for me. And I think art really does have the power to change people's minds. I mean, the best art is meant to make you question things, and it's meant to make you feel rebellious towards what you're being fed all the time. And that is, yeah, that's my outlet. I mean, I make some statements and stuff that I say, but a lot of it is just kind of like what's in my mind, and it's sort of just like therapy for whatever I'm thinking at the time. And a lot of it's sort of my genuine feelings on something, but then also kind of sarcasm and, you know, realizing that I'm, you know, a hypocrite as well. And that's just kind of the way that it comes out. So, but it is therapy for me. Yeah. And I hope that it, you know, makes other people feel the same.
Yeah. So, and you know, so I wanted to like, we got like 15 more minutes, and wow, the time's really gone by. But, so you know, you brought up therapy. So you've been kind of pretty open, like even in your interviews, and you know, we've talked about this too. Is you know, your struggles with mental health, right? And some mental health issues, and so I wanted to kind of connect it. Like, have you thought about your issues, like the things that you struggle with, and related them to, like, did that have anything to do with the music when you talk about your music as therapy? Right?
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Is that something that kind of naturally led you?
Yeah, so I think I've had quite, you know, heavy battles with depression and anxiety, and I've had a bout of panic attacks that was, well, I still get them occasionally, that was probably related to when I was a kid. I used to have seizures sporadically, and they never really found out what was wrong with them, and then that used to make me feel panicky if I didn't feel well or anything like that. But from about 10 is the kind of the first time I remember kind of feeling depressed for no reason, not really quite understanding it. And yeah, writing lyrics and kind of then matching them up with a melody that makes me feel something is definitely therapeutic for me. Because it's sort of like talking about like shouting into the void, which is what I think is the big difference between kind of doing something for yourself and creating something or finding another outlet. Is like, I am very, very suspicious of these kind of, and I'm not saying they're all bad intention, but these like pointless fucking Twitter or social media kind of platitude mental health on TikTok things. Like, there's almost like a fetishization of it, or like a romanticization of it. I mean, some big artists do it. I think Youngblood does it. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have mental health problems, but I feel like he kind of slaps it on a lunchbox and then like sells it to his fans a little bit. And I think that kind of instant, oh, just like love, like a tweet, like just love yourself, like follow me back and just love yourself and you'll be fine. It's such bullshit, because things like mental health, that if that's your only outlet, is like retweeting something or tweeting something like, you know, just love yourself, and that is never really gonna actually give you an outlet to what you're feeling. And I think that's the difference between social media and art, is that for me, creating something really is kind of manifesting something out of that pain and out of that frustration that you're feeling. Because even if that is shouting into the void and you put it up online and it gets 4 streams, you have taken something that's inside of you and then like put it into something that is real and kind of is meaningful. And I think people would feel a lot better if they kind of understood that things with mental health, that it's never gonna go away. It never goes away, but you shouldn't completely identify yourself as that problem, but understand that it's something that you're going to have to deal with, and try and manifest it into something that, you know, can help you, can maybe help other people, or can just get it out into something, whether that's a 1-minute song or a poem or just something that takes a bit more work and time than just kind of a tweet. And I think that's my experience with it. I had a bit of a phase of like constantly ranting and saying that stuff on Twitter, and it never ever made me feel better. And I am a little bit suspicious of this kind of new wave of, it feels like mental health is kind of now becoming part of identity politics a little bit, where
it's become like it's become like a fad. Like,
there's
and I think, you know, you see a lot of toxic positivity, you know, on especially, you know, you go to Instagram and you see all these things and they're just so completely, you know, and you're right. Like, you know, when I would listen to music, I've had like my partners in the past, my friends, you know, they've always asked me, like, you know, every time I write something, everything that I've written or recorded has always been super depressing.
Mm.
Like depressing or angry or something. It's never been. And they're like, why don't you write anything happy? I'm like, well, if I'm happy, then I'm not sitting writing songs. I'm like, out, hanging out with people, doing happy things, fun things. But it's just when I'm not, that's when I'll sit and become sort of really prolific, because that's where you deal with it. You do something constructive, 100%. But it's never about running away from it and telling yourself that you're enough, or all that other stuff that you see. It's about sort of exploring what you're going through, and a lot of times just immersing yourself in it. Like the exposure therapy in a way. And that's where the art really helps.
I think that is what art does. I think that's
like you can't run away from it. Right?
No, you can't run away. We can't run away from it. And people that think that they'll be able to, it's just naive. And again, it's that whole thing of this culture. It's like there's elements of truth in that. You do have to find people that understand. If you're around someone all the time that's like, depression isn't real, cheer up. Obviously, that's toxic, and that's not going to help. And you should try and love yourself and all that kind of bullshit as well. You should try and find a way of understanding that it's part of you, and whatever. But like that kind of obsession with like a constant fix of like an Instagram post or like a TikTok video or a tweet, it's like, oh man. And there's people that make fucking money off of it. Do you know what I mean? And it's just part of it makes me feel fucking ill, seriously, because it's just like. And I know everyone's experience is different, but I really think you're going to have a generation of kids like me who are growing up with that, like I did at school when I didn't fucking understand what depression was. I didn't understand why I was feeling sad for like no reason, waking up feeling empty. And at least I found something in music and TV and film and literature that I was even like The Catcher in the Rye. I know it's a cliche, but like, oh fucking hell, like. That isolation. But the thing about The Catcher in the Rye is, in the end there is a beauty to the way that book ends, but you feel like that is kind of helping you, because it's you understand that person's isolation. And then for me it was like, well, I want to kind of do that for myself. I want to write lyrics, I want to write songs, and I think people channeling it in something like that, they find a lot more they just find a better way of dealing with the way that they feel if they kind of channeled themselves into art a little bit more, I think.
Now, how do you prevent going down the road then? Well, I guess, okay. There's probably a question that's way above your pay grade and mine and everything too, but how do you go down the road that, you talk about Nirvana. I grew up on Nirvana. You did too. A lot of kids, it's funny, like my niece is 16 and she lives in Texas, and she's got all these Nirvana shirts and everything. I was like, what the fuck do you do? Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
She's like, no, I just, a lot of these kids think it was a clothing brand. And then she started listening to the music, and a lot of people who were born after Kurt Cobain died, listen to the music, and they're floored because, again, it's like what you said about the rock missing fuck you factor. Something they hear, like, wow, I never heard rock music like this before. And suddenly they're rediscovering bands like this. But anyway, Kurt Cobain, the direction he went down, Chris Cornell recently, which was just, for me, that was devastating. It was like my favorite singers of all time.
Yeah.
Probably the favorite singer. What a loss. But there's, they were doing this. If you heard their music, they were doing the same thing that you're talking about.
I think... I think that it is a difficult line. I think kind of mass fame probably doesn't help that situation. And it is a shame with Chris Con. Obviously, like so much documented about Kurt Cobain, he did end up shutting everyone out and immersed himself in addiction, which I do have some experience with. I was quite heavily addicted to Valium for a few years, and that took me a long time to get off of that. And that was my kind of that took that kind of numbness. That gave me a numbness that sort of got rid of the other numbness, but at least I could control that. And I think it is a difficult line. And Chris Cornell, though, is in particular, because it sounded like he had kind of his life in check at that time. But I suppose that's just a reminder that, again, it doesn't ever go away, and you have to keep track on it. And maybe sometimes, it isn't enough. it won't just be enough to make art. I mean, for me, I mean, a million different things can help a million different people, but for me, meds never really worked unless they were kind of self-administered. But exercise helps me, and it sounds like a cliche, and everyone fucking has kind of a snooty attitude towards it now, and I get that because a lot of doctors just say, like, you know, in the Fight Club thing, you know, about when he's trying to get to sleep, or regular exercise and a chamomile tea or whatever, go away. So I get that, but for me, exercise was like, well, okay, this is a physical. I can actually do something physical to try and alleviate something that I'm feeling mentally. So I do a lot of running, I do a lot of boxing. And that might come to a page where that doesn't end, and I'll have to try and find something else to do. But it's difficult. It's a difficult question. But I think it will give people more of an outlet if they do channel themselves into something. And you've got to have some people around you that you can talk to and have a good support network around you, which I'm lucky that I do. And I opened up to my family about my mental health struggle, and there's mental health issues in my family, so I do think genes play a role in it.
Oh yeah, they definitely do. Actually, they
100%.
Like there's a demonstrated hereditary factor when it comes to like predisposition to mental health issues of any kind.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
I mean, you know, like a lot of these. You were talking about seizures, you know, when you were younger. A lot of like epilepsy, like, these kinds of things were considered psychological issues before in the past, and then found out it was neurological. Then, you know, schizophrenia was considered to be like a psychological issue, and now we know it's neurodevelopmental. It's not like purely psychological issue. We know that about depression now, right? That a lot of it's just about neurotransmitters. If I take your dopamine, your serotonin, your you know, norepinephrine, oxytocin, these things, if I just tweak them up and down like a graphic equalizer and change your personality, just doing that. So there's a biochemical basis and there's a genetic basis to all of these things, and you know, we understand that a lot more now.
But I think as well with people like Kurt and Chris, and I think, you know, even really creative people, because I think a lot of the time people that do make the best art, they're definitely they are channeling it into something. But I think there's also the thing of, there's a classic Stephen Fry thing, which is like, obviously when it rains, it's real and you'll get wet, but the sun will come out. And I think that is, you just think if Kurt would have held on for 6 more months, he might have felt all right. He might have felt a bit better, and then he might have felt worse again. He might have held on and he might have overcome that, you know, and that's what I think's tragedy about Chris Cornell, because he was 50 or something, wasn't he? Like, he must have gone through those phases in his life where he felt really depressed and then he felt better. And you feel like if he would have held on for a bit longer, then maybe he would have felt okay for that little bit, and then he would have felt worse again. And that's something that I always try and tell myself when I'm in that kind of pit where it's like, especially when it's like weeks on end, you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, when is this going to end? It's like, it will end. It will end at some point for a little bit at the very least. And then you can deal with it again. And that's kind of the way that I try and look at it.
Yeah. And there's just like, I know we're almost out of time, but just, I guess in closing, like tying it back to, you know, what we were saying about privilege, I always think that, like, this is the biggest problem when talking about group privileges. And I understand that it exists, I understand it does, but it just excludes a lot of things, because you have to talk in monoliths. And you have, like, you know, someone like Chris Cornell, who had, you know, a great family, he had like millions of fans, he had lots of money, or Anthony Bourdain, same thing, Kate Spade, you know, like all these, Kurt Cobain. But I would think that I'm probably much more privileged than them, in the sense that I wasn't going through that war, or that, you know, that sort of torture, that agony in my mind.
Yeah, 100%.
Is, you know, so it's not just, it isn't just always about economics or identity or any of those things.
No, definitely not. No, it's a fluid thing. And what worries me, though, now I know about time, but is like if mental health then becomes this new kind of fad, which I think you're seeing it now, where it's like, well, people with mental health is now like a monolith, and this is how we're kind of talking about these people this week, and this is what they need to be dealing with. Like, real quick, I saw one thing on this kind of charity thing that I used to like. It's kind of a left-wing politics page that I used to follow, but I just got so bored of it, and it was like, words you should never use around people with mental health. And it was like, never use the word crazy, never use the word lunatic. And it's like, do you seriously fucking think that like a single mum with 2 kids who's who's dealing with depression gives a shit about that? She needs help. There needs to be a structure there that can help less privileged, well, everyone with mental health problems. But like, that's not what they're thinking about. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just bizarre to me.
Or the affirmations, man, just looking in the mirror and telling yourself, you know,
Exactly.
I'm worthy. Like, how many truly worthy people tell them to do that every day?
Yeah, I know, man.
It's just so stupid.
It's so fucking stupid.
Yeah, there's a dumb. But anyway, man, so just tell everyone, like, what's going on next? What's next for False Heads?
So we just recorded our album with Frank Turner, and we've just basically finalized the release strategy for next year with our record label. So we will have a single out off that album, first single out off a second album in late January, early February. We're back on tour, and hopefully early 2023 we'll come back out to the States. Well, not come back out, but we'll come over to the States finally.
2023 or
possibly late 2022, depends on the way things are going. But the plan is to come back over and do the tour that we were supposed to do, go to South by Southwest in early 2023 and that kind of stuff. So, but we're looking at we're going to come over to Europe and hopefully Japan as well next year. So, and the second album will come out. So it's going to be quite a hectic year for us.
Can I say that I've heard some of the stuff off the
You can say that you've heard some of the stuff.
Well, I just said it. Yeah, I was going to say. So I already have like a favorite. And it is. I think one of the things that one of the songs that you send me. I don't know if you want me to say the title or not, but
yeah, man.
Yeah, Again and Again. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Thick Skin. Yeah, Again and Again. Yeah.
Again and Again. Yeah, I think that's one of the best things I've ever. I mean, it's just it floored me. And I know I haven't heard like the final, but I think it's gonna be fucking phenomenal. So
thank you very much, man. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I actually have some comments here. Stony Lonesome is saying, I'm jealous of Luke for touring with Queens of the Stone Age. Josh Homme is a master.
We didn't actually tour with them. We supported them. We supported Josh Homme when he did a solo thing at the Nick Alexander Memorial Trust, and we supported Queens of the Stone Age in Croatia. But we met Josh. Seemed like a real nice guy, and they were fucking amazing live. They were incredible. So it's fucking amazing.
And there's another Slim
Shady.
There you go. And then Zuma saying good conversation. Wise beyond your 20s, Luke. You're wise beyond your 20s.
Thank you very much.
This is the thing. It happens with musicians. Anytime I talk to musicians, it's like you forget what age they are. Like you just don't. There's something that you're in tune with in the universe, and I don't want to get like all woo because Christopher Hitchens is going to be like.
Yeah. Well, I do owe a lot of it to Christopher Hitchens, to be fair. A lot of that was Chris. That was kind of my like non-art awakening, really. Christopher Hitchens, yeah.
Okay, so Dulce is saying, of course I need to hear that song now. So she's actually she works in the music industry here in Canada. So she's
Oh, okay, amazing. Yeah.
She is so. I might actually just I might just play it to her because I'm going to see her at some point. Yeah. Awesome. So anyway, Luke, man, thanks. It's a pleasure as always.
Man, thank you very much. No, thanks for having me. It was a really good, fun conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. So the last thing, do you want to say that you're going to be starting? You want to start your own podcast? You said. Yeah,
I'm planning. I was meant to be I'm going to still try and do it in December. Well, probably not now, but early January. So obviously, Ali, if you come on, and I'm trying to get to start with. Religion and stuff like that we spoke about, but then I'm going to kind of open it up to other people in the music industry. Might try and get Danny Fields on. He's in London this week, so I think I'm going to see him before Christmas. And I might even try and get Iggy on, but he's a busy man. But I'm going to get one up and running. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for listening to this. I mean, we've got quite a few people listening to this, and I think there'll be more people. So this is the audio version is going to be out on. If you're watching this right now, just click the like button. Take a second right now to do that, and also to subscribe. I mean, this is a relatively new thing. It's been new for quite a while, unfortunately, because I haven't been super regular with it. But we're going to start growing it and having really just great conversations with great people like this more and more. So thanks, Luke.
Thanks very much. Man. Thank you.
And 1 second.